guys. Today I'm going to be reading with you an article that we're going to use to build up more background information for us about Salva and his journey. It's called Time Trip, Sudan Civil War. We're going to use this article to help us put together what would be a 5-step essay at the end of the week. We're going to work on that together to give us some practice at writing a 5-step. So this article will be used to get information about that 5-step for us. Again, some background information for Salva. The current conflict in Sudan is only the latest chapter in the country's violent history. Apart from an 11-year peace from 1972 to 1983, Sudan has been entrenched in war since it became an independent nation in 1956. The Darfurian conflict erupted just as a long civil war between northern and southern Sudan was winding down. That war was fought between the mainly Muslim Arab North and the mostly non-Muslim, non-Arab South. It began in 1983 and was one of the longest-lasting and deadliest wars of the 20th century. About 2 million civilians were killed, and more than 4 million people were forced to flee their homes. Okay, so this is kind of giving you some background information about Sudan itself and its violent history. The fact that they've been entrenched or been involved in war for many, many years. The conflict that Salva is a part of began in 1983 and was the longest-lasting wars that they had in the 20th century. So again, giving you some background information about Sudan. Some of those refugees are known as the Lost Boys of Sudan. Fleeing violence and the fear of being forced into war, thousands of boys fled by foot to Ethiopia. The 1,000-mile trek was grueling. They went days without food or water, eating leaves and berries and sucking liquid from mud to stay alive. Exhausted, some boys died of starvation or dehydration. Okay, so some of the people, just like how Salva is running away from his school, there's a group of boys known as the Lost Boys of Sudan. These were ones who fled their country because they had the fear of being forced into war, because even young boys were forced to be a part of the military and part of the soldiers for the wars. So they walked by foot to another country. Ethiopia is about 1,000 miles away, and it was just a very tough trek for them. Many of them died of starvation or dehydration because they didn't have enough water as they made this journey. Let's continue on. The boys who continued found shelter at a refugee camp in Ethiopia, but their safety was short-lived. Fighting erupted in Ethiopia in 1991, forcing them to flee again. As they ran, gunmen and tanks fired at them. To escape, the boys had to cross the crocodile-infested River Gilo. Thousands drowned, were eaten by crocodiles, or were shot. So after traveling for some time, they actually got to Ethiopia and found a refugee camp there and stayed there for a little short while. But then fighting erupted there in 1991, and they were forced to flee again. As they were running away, soldiers were chasing after them, chased them to the river where there were crocodiles. Many of them jumped into the river to try and escape and were either eaten by crocodiles, they drowned, or they were shot by the rebels as they stood on the, or not the rebels, they were shot by the soldiers as they stood off to the side. By the time the boys arrived at a refugee camp in Kenya in 1992, only 10,000, fewer than half of the original 26,000, were still alive. After 9 years at the camp, about 4,000 of the lost boys were brought by the U.S. government to cities in the United States to begin new lives. Okay, so out of 26,000 that started, only about 10,000 actually survived and made it to Kenya in 1992. They spent about 9 years at that camp, and the U.S. government came in and brought them to the United States so they can start a new life here in the United States. Now, some lost boys are returning home. A peace agreement signed on January 9, 2005 officially ended Sudan's civil war. Though aid agencies recently reported that many communities in the south still lack food and water, some 500,000 Sudanese are expected to return home this year in what is one of the largest movements of people in recent history. Okay, so in 2005, a peace agreement was signed, and many of those lost boys started to go through the process to return home. Unfortunately, many of the places that they lived in, the communities, still do not have a lot of food and water, but they were going to return home so they could be with their families. All right, once again, we are going to be using this article to help us write our 5-step tomorrow. So be aware of the article. Know what we talked about as we read through it so that you can help us to write our 5-step tomorrow. I will see you guys then. Have a great day.